Well, let's kind of break or dive into these a little bit deeper. Do you want to start and just kind of talk about essential nutrients and what they are?
Yeah. And this is sort of the overall case, quite frankly, whether or not you should be taking supplements or not, because obviously all these nutrients are available in our foods. So all the essential nutrients we can definitely get them through foods, because otherwise, before supplements existed, all we had were food, and we managed to
Cavemen
make it
weren't
for a few
popping
million
like
years.
multivitamins.
Exactly. So of course we can get them in through food. But when you look at the levels of nutrients in the modern day, what the average person takes in and what even the RDA recommendation levels are, you see that on average people are not consuming enough nutrients. So, and hopefully we can throw this up on the graph if anyone's watching the video, and we'll definitely put a link to it. But there is this sort of graph of all the nutrients and the percentage of people that are lacking in these nutrients. Now, I don't have it here in front of me, but roughly speaking, 60 to 70% of people are going to be deficient in a lot of nutrients. Things like iodine, things like omega-3, vitamin D, magnesium, all these nutrients, most people are actually not consuming enough, even to meet the RDA.
Yeah.
Which brings me on to this point about, so there's obviously, if you're really lacking in some of these nutrients, you're literally going to end up with diseases like scurvy if you don't get enough vitamin C.
Right.
So that was a big deal when people were sailing around the world, and if they didn't have any kind of sources of vitamin C, that was a big problem. But then there's sort of the RDA. Now, there's a lot of people will dispute that the RDAs are way too low. So it's just enough not to get the disease, but definitely nowhere close to optimum levels. And what's interesting is when you study healthy people or healthy populations, their level of nutrients are way, way higher. So I always talk about this book back here, the Nutrition and Physical Degeneration book by Weston A. Price. And he traveled around the world to remote tribes and civilizations that were incredibly healthy, that didn't suffer from all the modern metabolic diseases. And we covered that in the other podcasts. So, but their level of nutrients were way higher, like 10 times the amount of fat-soluble nutrients. So that's like fat-soluble nutrients like vitamin A, D, E, and K, K2 in particular. And then and about 4 times more water-soluble vitamins. So their levels of nutrients were way, way higher. And that would be more close to what I would consider optimum nutrient levels. So when you look at that, you go, okay, wow, most people are not getting in enough nutrients through their diet. And even at that, I would say that the levels should be much higher again for optimum health.
Yeah, I was going to ask why? You know, is it because we're not eating the right foods, or is it that the foods we're eating just don't have the nutrients they used to? Like, are we messing them up, genetically modifying them? Is the soil depleted? What's going on there?
Well, the answer's in the question. It is exactly both of those reasons. So one, and obviously we covered this before, and we'll continue to cover it, is the modern day diet. About almost 70% of it is ultra-processed food, which is devoid of all these nutrients. So when you eat a more natural diet that's more nutrient dense, obviously your levels of nutrients are going to be much higher. So the type of food, for sure, is a big, big factor. So the first thing I would always recommend when it comes to nutrient levels is obviously reduce the ultra-processed foods dramatically, eat a lot more natural, real foods, and by default, your levels of nutrients are going to go up a lot. So if you go back more towards a traditional diet, your levels of nutrients will be much, much higher. So that's for sure number one. And then number two, because even people that are health conscious, and they do that, they can still be lacking a lot of nutrients because of the second point that you brought up there, which is the quality of food. Because even if you eat like really good food, vegetables, fruits, proteins, fish, all these things, a lot of these things, even like soil depletion, because they're not properly doing crop rotation, so the soil becomes depleted of certain minerals, for instance, like we probably don't get as much magnesium as we used to. So that's a big factor, because obviously the way the world works, a lot of it is driven by economics. So if you're just trying to maximize profits all the time, well, you're not going to take the care to get the proper nutrient density, because if you're going to sell whatever it is, like a carrot or an egg or whatever, people just go, well, that's a carrot and that's cheaper, so I'll get this carrot, or that's an egg and that egg is cheaper, so I'll take this egg, not understanding that, the quality comes into it, and that's a big, big deal. So that's a big problem and a big reason why we don't get in enough nutrients. So even if you're trying to really optimize your nutrient levels, you're eating more of a natural diet, you've cut out a lot of ultra-processed food, you may still be lacking in some nutrients.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is it safe to assume that most Americans are deficient in certain areas?
Yeah, again.
Even if you have a, healthy, well-rounded diet?
Yeah. So, unless you're literally growing your own food and you're doing, you're absolutely maximizing everything. So going actually back to the type of foods, for instance.
Yeah.
So when you look at people who are, the remote tribes and civilizations, and they had this great nutrient density, they were eating a lot of foods that we don't consume today, even if you're eating a healthy diet.
Oh, interesting.
So, for example, the most nutrient-dense food on the planet is liver.
I knew you were going to say it.
But how many people listening to this actually eat liver? Probably not a lot.
Right.
Now.
Yeah, we don't prioritize organ meats anymore.
Exactly.
And it used to be like a prized thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Because even in this country, the Native Americans, they would have actually, when they hunted, the first thing they would have done is eat the organs and some of the fat. And they actually would have left the lean meats to the scavengers.
So weird.
Whereas now you go in and it's always the lean meats, because it's easier to cut, it's more tender, like a fillet or a sirloin or New York steak or whatever. But they're not as nutrient dense as, of course, as the organs. Whereas if you eat the liver, the kidneys, the brain, the spleen, all these things, they're incredibly nutrient dense. But of course, they're not as delicious. So
interesting.
That's a big, big factor. So they would have, in all these other, remote tribe civilizations, they prized these things. And even things like cod liver oil, that was a big thing that they would have been into because of the nutrient density, a lot of vitamin A, D, and some EPA and DHA.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what are the specific nutrients in the organ meats that we're needing?
Yeah, so
I know there's a lot. We maybe can't go into all of them, but
huge amounts. But yeah, liver is going to have a huge amount of vitamin A and really good absorbable vitamin A. So that's another thing. Or the types, and we'll go into that.
Bioavailability.
Bioavailability. Yeah. So yeah, these are very bioavailable nutrients. But a lot of vitamin A. You're going to get a lot of iron in there as well. Really good protein, B vitamins. So even if, again, hopefully we can bring up a little chart and show what the liver nutrient levels are compared to even just normal meat. Huge difference. Colossal differences. So that's where you're going to get. And also shellfish is brilliant. Things like oysters and clams. Again, iron levels through the roof. You're going to get zinc, really high in zinc. So oysters are considered an aphrodisiac. A lot of the reason because the huge amounts of zinc, again, very absorbable.
What does zinc go on to do?
Well, zinc is brilliant for hormones, for testosterone in particular.
That's what I was getting at, yeah.
But also brilliant for your immune system, brilliant for skin, hair, nails. So really good all across the board, very good nutrients. So they're the type of things that are, again, shellfish, organ meats, really nutrient-dense foods. But again, a lot of people just don't consume these type of foods anymore. So that's the big thing. So yeah, the type of food. Now, if you're really into all that and you do consume that, and just as a by the way, I know we're talking about supplements today, but I love to get this. I get this ground meat that has these organ meats mixed in.
Yeah.
So there's a certain percentage of liver, a certain amount of kidney, certain amount of heart, and then the rest is just the normal.
That's good because a lot of people just don't have the palate.
Yeah,
I really tried. I went down like this. I got super focused. I was like, I want to eat liver every day, and I did for a couple of weeks, but eventually it's not my thing.
Yeah.
So I need to try the ground thing. I know we talked about it.
Yeah, because it's only still about 80% normal, but then you get all these organ meats, roughly the other 20%, and that way you don't even taste it.
Yeah.
So you make it up and flavor it and put on your herbs and spices and stuff. And
how many ounces of organ meat do you think we should be taking in a day? Or I guess specifically we can just talk about liver because it's probably the...
Well, if you could get the equivalent to, I mean, even 1 ounce would be incredible nutrient density. You wouldn't even need that every day. So you'd only need a very small amount. So even per week, you'd need only maybe 2 or 3 ounces of organ meats a week, and you're going to get incredible levels. Great thing about fat-soluble nutrients is they store in the body. So you don't need to take them every single day.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of other nutrients, you need to take them more frequently to get the benefit from them. But again, going back to the bigger picture, most people don't get in enough of even the RDA.
Got it.
And then for optimum health, we're nowhere close to that. And by sure, the first thing you should do is reduce the ultra-processed food, more natural foods, if you can, in some shape or form. Now, I don't know if people are going to be willing to do this. But again, there are smart ways to do it. Because even some things like you can get like cured meats. And again, if it's natural and grass-fed and good quality, but like I think it's Braunschweiger and liverwurst, these types of things, they'll have a certain amount of organ meats in there. And again, you don't really taste it. So there are ways to consume it where you don't taste it. But for most people, I think that starts to kind of go into the case, a good case for taking food supplements.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a need. Most people aren't getting enough, organ meats or whatever, or high quality foods. And there's just certain limitations in the foods that are accessible to us. So what are some of these essential nutrients that we can be taking in supplement form to enhance our health overall?
Okay, yeah. Well, again, of course, it's going to be different for everybody. And I mean, if you really wanted to know, you'd get blood tests and you'd find out what your levels are, and then you'll know which ones you really need. But having said all that, for the average person, I'll give you my top 5, okay?
Sure.
And ones that I would even take myself and recommend for like 90%.
Yeah, let's go through them. Tell us what they do, and that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So